Salutations and welcome to the new Dakota Boys Talk Movies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Dakota.
And tonight we are going into the jungles of India to discuss Disney's new, I'm going to put live action in quotes, live action rendition of their 1967 classic animated feature, The Jungle Book. This one directed by Jon Favreau. If you haven't seen any trailers for this or anything, the reason I have to put live action in quotes is because it's all CGI except for Mowgli. Like, even the jungles. This movie was literally filmed in downtown LA in a soundstage. But amazingly, looks pretty realistic. You can't really. It looks like it's some sort of jungle. It doesn't look cartoony.
Yeah, the jungle is actually pretty realistic.
Yeah.
As opposed to the animals who, well, obviously are CGI.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing that tonight. So I think without further ado, we'll go into that. So it's Jungle Book is one of those where it has been done over the years since 1967. They've tried to make, like, there was a literal live action Jungle Book made in 1993 or 1994. It had Sam Neill, and Disney made it.
Yeah, with Jason Lee.
Yeah, I think he was. It was like an older Mowgli.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. Well, you meet him when he's a kid, and then he grows up. Right.
Yeah, he becomes older in the movie because they wanted to make him kind of more of a romantic lead.
Yeah.
And Disney made a Wonderful World of Disney sequel called Mowgli's Story, and I think it had, if you're familiar with the Disney Channel original movie, Johnny Tsunami, that kid played Mowgli, I believe. And that was like how the Air Buddies movies are, where they make the animals' mouths. They use real animals and then make their mouths move, and it looks really awkward.
Yeah.
But really, outside of those attempts and like a few other, like, more generic studio attempts, Jungle Book isn't really necessarily an overdone movie. And so it was interesting to see, like, how would they, since Disney was making this, how would they modernize it, and how much of the beats of the old one would they follow? When you look at the old one, it's really like, kind of like Mowgli jumping from set piece to set piece, where it's like, you can't live in the jungles anymore, you need to go to a man village, and it kind of jumps from, maybe I'll be an elephant, maybe I'll do this. Then Ka tries to get him, and then it's like, maybe I'll do this. And it kind of jumps from set piece to set piece in a way. So going into this, I was like, okay, is one of the ways I'll modernize is to give it kind of more of a flowing, threaded story through it. And did you feel they did that in this one?
Honestly, I was expecting just kind of like Apocalypto, where he's just running through the jungle for his life.
That's what I was kind of wondering, because it was hard to tell. Like, was this going to be just like, if you're not familiar with Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, it's basically you follow a guy named like Jaguar Paw. Basically, Mel Gibson wanted to make a chase movie, but he wanted to do a chase movie nobody's ever done before, which is just running. And so it's just like this guy basically running through the jungle. And so you kind of wondered if it would be similar to that. And I mean, it really isn't. It was kind of more just, it did thread a little better, the old one, with him kind of falling into these things along the way. But the setup is a little similar, except that I thought they did a better job of Mowgli's backstory into why Shere Khan wanted him gone, wanted to kill him.
There you go.
Whereas the old one was just kind of like, Shere Khan just kind of seems to come out of the blue and decides he's going to kill Mowgli, and there's not really any reason except that you're just supposed to assume, I think, Shere Khan hates man. But this one kind of has a more fleshed out backstory to it, to where it kind of like helps even out that a little bit. And so I don't know, I enjoyed that they had that to it. How did you? Now we mentioned that this is all the animals and jungle in this were CGI, and then they had basically a bunch of famous people do the voices in this that Jon Favreau just picked his friends or something, I guess, and people he thought would be good. How did you feel about the voice cast in this?
Honestly, it was a little underwhelming. I mean, they got these people that are famous, Giancarlo Esposito, from
he was Keela the Wolf.
Yeah, from Breaking Bad, was in it, not for very long. I'm still not sure how to pronounce her name, Lupita Nyong'o, or...
Yeah, she played the weird little alien in Force Awakens.
Yeah, from 12 Years a Slave fame.
And that too.
And it's just, even Scarlett Johansson's part, they were so short. It's just like... You could have got some lesser known famous people for this.
Yeah,
but...
it didn't really. A lot of the parts, it didn't really seem to matter that they had the part. I thought Ben Kingsley was a good replacement for Sebastian Cabot, who did Bagheera in the animated one, and just kind of bringing that same kind of gravitas to Bagheera's voice. And it was nice to see Ben Kingsley just in a respectable role again.
Yeah, Idris Elba, for sure did a good job. But
yeah, he was definitely probably out of the voice actors, probably one of the standouts. He just nailed it as the voice of Shere Khan, in my opinion.
I think he kind of actually threw himself into actually doing it. Like, instead of recording the line, sitting down, he was probably like standing up, like acting out his frustrations.
And he kind of already has a growly voice, and so he says everything in a way where it sounds like he's just about to eat you as he's saying it. And then, of course, you have the national treasure, Bill Murray, doing Baloo. And in this one, in the old one, if you remember, Baloo basically just looks like a grizzly bear or a brown bear or something. In this one, they give him more of a sloth bear look, where he's like a little more fat and squattier and like his longer hair, and just kind of seems to fit a little more in a jungle.
If Jack Black was an animal, this is how he would look. Basically, is what I was saying.
Maybe something like that. And so, yeah, like the voice cast was fine, but like Dakota said, it was like there were only a few parts that were huge, and all the other parts you could have just hired a bunch of like video game voice actors or something to do it. It helps bring in people to the movie though, and you can throw up there Scarlett Johansson and whatever, and whoever else it is. Gary Shandling as a porcupine, this was his last movie. Because he's been dead a few months now.
Yeah, even Jon Favreau himself kind of put himself in this movie.
Yeah, and his kids. His kids were wolf pups, and so yeah, I mean, that was interesting. Now, as far as the special effects go, how did you feel those worked, Dakota, doing this whole CGI jungle? Obviously, the animals were going to be, you knew from the get-go when they said, we're going to do a live-action Jungle Book, that the animals are going to be CGI. But how did you feel about the entire environment being CGI now that you saw it?
Yeah, that one I thought was going to be tough, but it actually turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to. The only thing that really distracts from the movie is there are moments where the animals kind of have like this glassy eye look to them, where they look kind of...
Yeah, it happened a lot with Bagheera.
Yeah.
Like, he'd come into a shot, and it was like, he almost like felt like he's floating forward, and he kind of had these glassy eyes. And so it's like, and then there was a few shots where when they would do kind of a far off shot of just watching their silhouettes move across, it was like you could tell Mowgli was even CGI in that shot, where,
Yeah.
It just like gravity worked differently sometimes because of the fact of the CGI, because you can't get the flow right. So sometimes when like Shere Khan would hop up onto a rock, like the way he moved didn't feel very natural tiger, just because it was like, they're trying to do it in a computer. And so there was a few times like that where it was distracting. Overall, I wouldn't say that it like was a huge deterrent to the movie, but it was definitely distracting at times. But it still looked, considering though, it still looked pretty darn good when you think about the fact that they probably just at times would have to throw in like some sort of real looking rock or a tree and then just fill in around it. They made that work, but yeah, and so like I said, it follows kind of that basic story where Mowgli realizes for the sake of the jungle and for the sake of himself, he's going to have to leave the jungle because of Shere Khan, and you kind of follow his journey of understanding. It's kind of, it's that kind of coming of age story where it's like he's understanding who he is, and at the same time, this jungle around him is having to kind of find. There's kind of a double identity type thing in this because the jungle kind of changes through this too, like the jungle life or whatever, and so it's kind of an interesting blend of those things. Now this boy who played Mowgli, he's a newcomer, and I'm trying to his name. I had it here. I gotta remember. I think it's like Neil something. Neil Sethi. This is his first movie. He's just this little kid who is actually born in New York City, New York, but he looks Indian. He's apparently of Indian descent. How did you feel he did in this? Especially when you consider, okay, this is your first movie. Not only is it your first movie, but you're having to react to things that aren't really there, and probably having to react to Jon Favreau saying, "All right, I'm pretending to be Baloo right now."
Oh man, I thought he was pretty good. He did a very good job, I thought. Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, going back to what you said about one thing I definitely liked about this movie is I'm getting kind of tired of every time we see a movie where it's supposed to be set in another country or another time, everyone having like this British accent or Australian accent or Irish accent. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Maybe French accent, whatever. But in this one, everyone kind of just talked the way they would talk.
Yeah.
And I thought that kind of added a little bit to the characters. Like they come from someplace or they've been through something where they're not really all from the same place, coming from the same place. But I mean, this kid's American. He pretty much sounds like it.
He just talks English like, well, if you look at the old Jungle Book, that kid just talks just straight up American English too. But yeah, yeah, it's like when you watch those old Sword and Sandals epics where it's like Roman soldiers and they all have British accents and stuff. Yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, I thought he did a really good job too. For the most part, I wouldn't say like, well, this like, I didn't really see too many, at least maybe through the trick of movie magic, we didn't see too many of the first movie jitters come through, or just like lack of experience. But yeah, he seemed like a pretty fun, energetic kid, and just the way he played it, he was just like excited. He just looked like he was excited and like, I don't know, he's probably just coached to kind of be his inner animal type thing, because it just felt like he was really good at playing it like kind of in an animal way where, he just kind of like ran everywhere and was kind of scrappy, and that just came across really well. Of course, when you're raised by wolves, as Mowgli is, that's how you would be. And there's even a part where I noticed where he's going up these steps. I don't know if you caught this, Dakota, but he's walking on, 2 feet. But then he gets to the steps, and he gets down, and he runs up it, and he kind of hops sideways on all fours like a monkey goes up steps. And I just thought that was interesting. Like, I'm sure it was just like, I don't know, he grew up in the jungle, and that's how he saw animals kind of. And it's just kind of an interesting thing they kind of threw in there just to give Mowgli a little more of a of a fleshed out character. I just found that kind of interesting in that moment. Yeah, and so I mean, just is a pretty well executed movie. I mean, what would you say like were some of the flaws in it?
Kind of going back to the I don't know, bad CGI on the characters. One thing that I found a little jarring was Christopher Walken does the voice of King Louis.
Yeah.
And there's a part where he bursts into just this random song.
Okay, that would definitely be my biggest negative. Was going into this, I was like, okay, we saw in the preview that they had Baloo kind of hum and whistle Bare Necessity, so you knew somehow they were going to throw back to the Sherman Brothers songs from the original animated one. But it was like, that's the thing with these doing this now, when they're not, Disney isn't giving a modern telling of these stories. They're doing a modern telling of their original animated one. So it's like a double retelling, because it's like, how do you play making it fresh and original, but at the same time we're still Disney. You got to pay homage to that one. And I really felt that it all worked pretty well in those aspects, except for the music. I felt like that was the most jarring thing in this movie, because if they would have just used those songs, I think, as the score in the like, there was times when the "Trust in Me" tune would sneak into the background music, or the where the original Jungle Book theme background, like that kind of worked. But there were a few times when, like, yeah, that would be the most jarring one. Would be the King Louis part, where it was like, it just feels like there's kind of this tense scene, and all of a sudden it just like bops into this 60s song of kind of a half version of "Wanna Be Like You," and that's what was really jarring. Was it was like the composer John Debney was doing kind of a modern score for a modern movie, but then it would all of a sudden just very not subtle transition, but kind of train wreck transition into like the 60s tune, and it was just like, I don't know. I felt that was a thing that really didn't work in this movie as much. I mean, maybe there was a way they could have done it better, but I don't know. The Bare Necessities thing, that kind of worked a little better.
Yeah.
And those are the two that are used the most. The biggest in the movie would be Bare Necessities and Be Like You, but
yeah. Honestly, it was a little dodgy from the get-go, just because, the monkeys capture Mowgli. They take him.
This isn't really a spoiler because this is the original.
Take him to see King Louis, and I was getting vibes from Apocalypse Now, pretty much. When you first meet King Louis, and for some reason there's a cowbell in this scene, which we found out later what that was a reference to, and I don't know how that made me feel.
Just think about it. Christopher Walken, cowbell. You'll figure it out.
And then Christopher Walken kind of talks with this tone.
Yeah,
that just implies mob boss.
Yeah, he's basically like talking like a New York mob boss. But that's like what you were talking about, where like they weren't trying to be like necessarily like country accurate. It was like, and you're Christopher Walken, just be your Suicide Kings character or something.
And I could have got used to that. And then this mobster just breaks out into song.
Yeah, yeah. You were okay with it. I agree. You were okay with Christopher Walken and his Colonel Kurtz introduction, but then when he all of a sudden does a Louis Armstrong or what? No, well, that's who does the original. But it's just kind of like, yeah, it was a little much. Like, again, just because of Bill Murray's character and the fact that it's laid back and how they worked it in, the Bare Necessities wasn't quite as jarring with how they did it. But yeah, that was really, yeah. Anyway, let's just go into maybe just like final thoughts. So final thoughts on the Jungle Book, Dakota.
Overall, I thought it was a pretty good movie. remakes, and that's what this was. Kind of, especially one that is kind of achieved status of like a legendary movie, something a huge number of the populace has seen and loves, is tough. And these guys, I thought, overcame it pretty well. And, it's not a perfect movie, but, it was entertaining. I'll give it that. Pretty solid overall. And
what would you grade it?
Oh, letter grade?
Sure.
Stars?
Let's do letter grade.
Moons? Okay.
Letter grade just seems to be the easiest.
I'm going to go B.
All right, a B. And my final thoughts would be, yeah, it was definitely an entertaining movie. I found this kid who played Mowgli to be a really, he played it really interesting, where he kept me engaged, especially, like I said, considering he's new in a CGI environment. But yeah, they did a good job modernizing it, giving it a fresh take, making it more adventurous, I thought.
Oh yeah.
And there were a few things that were kind of like, I wish they could have done that better. But the Disney machine is the Disney machine. They probably had to get "I Want to Be Like You" in there and things like that. But it was still fun. It was still had a lot of good elements to it, and they definitely did a lot. I mean, this could have been a disaster, trying to take a movie like The Jungle Book and do it in this way and then make it all CGI. But it wasn't. It wasn't a disaster. I don't know what that means for Disney. I don't know if it means they should just keep making movies like this. But this one worked for the most part. And so I guess with that said, I would probably give it a B+ overall. And I guess my only warning would be probably if your kid's under 8, there's a few scenes that get a little intense, because it is, it is a more real-looking adventure. It's not like, obviously it's still a PG family movie, so it's not like overly, blood squirting at the screen or anything like that. But, you know your kids. Just think about it. There's a tiger that looks real that is trying to kill a child and things like that. And so that'd be the only warning I would give, is if, obviously since this is a Disney movie and about your kids, but your kids. But yeah, so Dakota gives it a B. I give it a B+. We didn't see it in 3D just because we're cheap. But I did hear that it looks good in 3D, so that's up to you. So with that, remember to check us out. We're on YouTube. We're on iTunes. Subscribe to us in those places. That's really helpful to us when you do that. And also, we are, of course, on Facebook and Twitter. So you can follow us and like us on those things. We try to post updates and news things. But yeah, so any feedback is always awesome. So make sure you're doing those things, letting us know you're there. So with that, I'm Steven.
And this is Dakota.
See you later.